What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and in the ongoing story about a guest that passed away at Epic Universe riding Stardust Racers, there's yet another wrinkle or two in this story, as now there is a manslaughter investigation kicking off over this incident, as well as the family of the victim has hired a very prominent civil rights attorney to basically, I guess, protect them during this investigation that is going on. So some other layers have been added to this. So we're going to read through this article from News 6 in Orlando and give some thoughts about it. They say manslaughter investigation kicks off over guest who died after riding Stardust Racers at Epic Universe. Sheriff's office said investigation is to determine whether negligence was a factor. And for those that don't know, that are just getting caught up on this story, a guest passed away after riding Stardust Racers. As we first reported on September 18th, a tragic accident took place the night of September 17th involving a guest passing away shortly after riding Stardust Racers at Epic Universe. The guest, later identified as 32-year-old Kevin Rodriguez Zavala, had CPR performed on him inside the park, and shortly after he was taken off the attraction. Zavala was taken to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead shortly after 10 p.m. An autopsy was performed, and Chief Medical Examiner Joshua Stefani, MD with Orange and Osceola counties, stated that the cause of death was multiple blunt impact injuries, which has caused a lot of speculation as to what happened on this ride, and we'll talk about it a little bit after this. But if you want even more details on what happened here, there are a couple of previous videos that you can check out. We're going into more details and some eyewitness accounts as well. It says, following the death of a guest who rode the Stardust Racers roller coaster at Epic Universe last week, investigators now say they are looking into the case under the state's manslaughter statute. And they did say the manner of death is an accident. And it should be noted as well, Zavala was determined to have a pre-existing spinal injury before he rode this. So it's unclear whether that contributed to the accident, that's, I'm sure, part of the investigation going on here. It says, despite that, Universal Orlando's safety guide shows that Stardust Racers is not for guests with back, neck, or similar physical conditions. And on Monday, Orange County deputies revealed that they are now investigating Zavala's death under Florida's manslaughter statute, which reads, the killing of a human being by the act, procurement, or culpable negligence of another without lawful justification, according to the provisions of Chapter 776, and in cases in which such killing shall not be excusable, homicide or murder, according to the provisions of this chapter, is manslaughter a felony of the second degree. News 6 reached out to the OCSO, which also clarified details about the investigation, saying that it is part of a standard procedure. They said, quote, this is a death investigation in cases which appear at first glance to be accidental deaths, which this case does. Detectives must determine whether there is any negligence, whether criminal or non-criminal, a spokesperson for the OCSO said. Manslaughter is just the name of the catch-all statute covering deaths that are not natural. Through their investigation, detectives attempt to figure out if there is any culpable negligence or a crime that occurred. And to accomplish this, we must let detectives follow the evidence and conduct a full and thorough investigation. Now, another layer to this as well is that the family of Kevin Rodriguez Zavala has hired an attorney. They have hired attorney Ben Crump, and they announced on Monday that he has been retained by Zavala's family, who are now looking for the release of maintenance logs, inspection records, ride data, and video footage. Crump, who is also known for his involvement in civil rights and personal injury cases, is famous for representing the families of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Crump also represented the family of 14-year-old Tyree Sampson, who passed away after riding an attraction at Icon Park in 2022. He said, quote, this tragic loss demands a thorough investigation and full transparency, he said. A man died after boarding a ride that should have been safe. We will hold all responsible parties to account and fight to ensure that all media inquiries be directed to Ben Crump's law office. Regardless, President Karen Irwin of Universal Orlando Resort wrote to employees that the roller coaster had functioned as intended prior to Zavala's death. And they said in that statement to team members, so this was to team members, not to necessarily like a public statement to the press or anything. This was to Universal Orlando team members. They said that our internal findings to date confirm that the ride systems functioned as intended. Equipment was intact at the ride start, throughout the duration of the ride, and upon the ride, the vehicles returned to the station, and our team members followed procedures. The attraction remains closed as we continue to work through a comprehensive review process in cooperation with the ride manufacturer of record. Safety is and always will be at the forefront of everything we do. They did say while the investigation continues, the rest of the park appears to be operating as usual. And it says Florida's largest theme parks are exempt from state safety inspections, unlike smaller venues and fairs. Instead, the largest theme parks like Disney World and Universal conduct their own inspections and have their own protocols, but they must report to the state any injury or death. And this is probably the kind of where this is going in this statement here. It says the department's current findings align with those shared by Universal after monitoring the same test and reviewing the same information. A spokesperson for the FDACS told News 6. The investigation is ongoing, and any additional information will be released as it becomes available. So, obviously, there are some wrinkles that are showing up in here. Now, I don't think it being, obviously, reading through this, the fact that it is now a manslaughter investigation doesn't really change any of the details here. As the investigators even said in that statement, that they agree with what Universal said from what they have seen and going through footage and testing, that the ride functioned as it was supposed to. And when it comes to the family hiring, this attorney, I can see from the perspective of you have Universal investigators, you have the state investigating, and just wanting somebody that is going to be looking out for your interest here. I can understand that from a grieving family. And I'm not going to read into anything. I think a lot of people will read into that, which, who knows if that's the case. But, you have a grieving family that, is wanting to find answers here about what happened. I mean, if something did happen here where Universal is at fault, that definitely is something that would need to be discovered and disclosed. And everybody, I think, would want to know that. But I will say this, obviously, more than likely is going to end up either going to court or end up in some sort of settlement, if I were to guess, after all of this, as Universal is going to want this to go away. Even if Universal, is deemed clear of any issues here, they're not going to want this to go to court and potentially lose in court. And then this would be a whole bigger issue if they had a court ruling against them about this on a major attraction at Epic Universe, which is a brand new theme park that they obviously want to continue to build interest in. So if I were to guess, I think that is what will end up happening here on some level. But really, when it comes to Universal, I don't know. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't really know in this situation, if it comes out that Universal didn't do anything wrong, what Universal could have done differently or should do differently, given they have multiple warnings before you ride this ride about if you have back issues, you have neck issues, you have heart issues, even if you're on blood pressure medication, they tell you not to ride this ride. It is ADA compliant, so wheelchair accessibility is there. He had to have been able to transfer himself from his wheelchair to the ride vehicle. And as long as he was able to do that, there's really nowhere a team member could step in and really, not allow them to ride. Some people pointed to team members, should have not let him ride. But if there's nothing that sticks out about if he could hold his head up, there's nothing that sticks out. They couldn't let him ride. They can't do a physical on the platform. They can't even ask about the disability. So essentially, when you're in these situations, it is on the guest to understand their medical condition, to basically take on that risk if they are going to ride an attraction like this with medical history that is warned about on this ride. And, they're probably still going to get sued over this, and they probably don't want to take it to court, but I don't really know what else Universal could do in this situation. Very likely after this, there are going to be some changes to maybe this ride, maybe other rides about some of the wheelchair accessibility, perhaps even warning people even more about if you have certain conditions, you are not to ride this ride. Make it very clear to people. But, I think it may be one of those things where it's a very isolated incident. These things don't happen very often. And it could just be one where they just, insurance probably kicks in on some level about these things. They just kind of, pay it out, move along, and maybe they don't make any changes, but I think you could see some changes depending on what the investigation reveals. If they do say something about the, harness on this ride, maybe if it was a different type of harness, he may not have passed away, but that's just speculation on my part. And if you're seeing the investigators openly saying, it doesn't look like anything happened here, Universal's saying that, I think that kind of tells us, how this is probably going to end up wrapping up, is they're going to find out that the ride, there's nothing that happened on the ride, nothing, catastrophic happened that caused his death in terms of a ride malfunction. Now, what makes this, another wrinkle in this is that he died from multiple blunt force trauma, which there are questions around that. There were some eyewitnesses that said it looked like his leg was broke. There was, at least we know of, one laceration. And so that does bring into some questions about, what happened here. Was he hit by something? And I talked about in the other videos as well that the chances of him being hit by something, of course, are not zero. But on this ride, You are not able to bring phones onto the ride. They have metal detectors, they have lockers. So the chances of somebody having something, while not zero, are relatively low. And we haven't heard anything about potentially like a phone or anything flying out of somebody's hand that could have hit him, which would have, potentially caused a grave injury, knocked them out potentially. But I still think, given everything we know about this, my initial hypothesis about what may have happened here, and again, this is just my speculation, is the fact that while on the ride, he may have had a medical incident where he passed out, or maybe he just passed out from the coaster. That does happen sometimes when people ride roller coasters or thrilling things. People can pass out. And if that did happen, given this coaster, it's a pretty intense roller coaster, goes 60 some miles per hour, has a lot of G-forces, that when he lost consciousness, his head could have definitely, moved around a bit, which could have caused some blunt force trauma. Also, if the limbs, if he did have a laceration, if you don't have control of your limbs, you could see a situation where that hits things around him, or it hits him in the head himself. And there's as well, some doctors have pointed out that people that are wheelchair bound are more prone to osteoporosis, potential of like a stroke, blood clots, things of that nature that could have happened on here in a medical fashion that led to his death. And I likely think that's what's going to come out of this, because I think if there's anything that major had happened on this ride in terms of a piece coming off or some sort of major malfunction, obviously I don't think the investigators would be agreeing with what Universal said, as Universal says that the ride functioned as it was supposed to. So then obviously you just look at what happened to Mr. Zavala while he was on this ride. But more than likely, given the the warnings about this ride, about if you have back issues, you have neck issues, you have heart issues, even if you're on blood pressure medication, they warn you not to ride this ride. He likely should not have ridden this ride in his medical condition. Again, this is my speculation and my guess here, and that ultimately is probably what led to this incident here. But of course, that can always change if more information comes out and things that we just aren't aware of yet that have not been announced. I feel terrible for his family, because it's just, you go to a theme park and you're there to have a good time, and something like this happens. It's just kind of unimaginable. I do feel for them. But if you do want to contribute to the GoFundMe for Kevin Rodriguez Zavala, I will link this into the description. They had an $8,000 goal. They currently have raised almost $27,000 for funeral and memorial expenses. So if you do want to donate, you can do that there to help them through this very difficult time. But as of now, that is all that we know on this. And again, this seemingly is changing on a daily basis. So when there is more information about this, I will be sure to let you know on this channel. But for now, that is going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.